Hello and welcome to another episode of Historically Marked. I am Jason. I am in South St. Louis. Actually, I'm in St. Louis County, literally, in the suburb of Lemay, which is where Jefferson Barracks Cemetery and Park are located. But there are some other cemeteries here too. In fact, I am in one that is kind of lumped together with two or three others. I am in Mount Olive Catholic Cemetery, and the reason I'm here is to visit a famous rhythm and blues musician's grave. His name is Louis Jordan, or Louis as it says on his stone, and I'm going to go ahead and show you that, and I'll explain more on who Jordan was and why he's buried here. So I'll go ahead and give you a little look at that. Here we go. So the stone looks to be right over there, and so it wasn't that hard to find because this section of the graveyard is small, meaning Mount Olive Catholic Cemetery, but there is no historical marker here, so like some of my recent episodes, I am breaking my own rule. But because this is Black Music Month, Black Music History Month, and I decided to do a little tribute to one of the most influential musicians in rock and roll history. Here is the final resting place of Louis, or as it says on his grave, Louis Jordan. He was born in Arkansas in 1908, and he died in Los Angeles in 1975. So I've known that he was buried here, and I mean, to my surprise, that I didn't realize of all places he was buried in St. Louis. So I was kind of wondering, doing a lot of research, and unfortunately I wasn't able to come across any conclusion. I mean, anyone can choose to be buried wherever they want, with the exception of national cemeteries, but unless they're military. So why is Louis Jordan buried here? Well, Louis Jordan, I mean, there's a lot of backstory on this, but he was married 5 times, and his 5th and final wife, who he married in the late 1960s, was from here. She was a showgirl, and that he met while playing at some club, and of course they got married, but they didn't live here, so Louis Jordan, okay. So I'll give you a little backstory on him. Yes, he is one of rock and roll's leading pioneers. In the 1940s, he had a great career on the Billboard Rhythm Blues, or race charts, as they were called back then, the Harlem Hit Parade. He had a string of #1 singles from 1942 to 1950. And by the early 1950s, the hits kind of stopped. And there's a lot of different reasons behind that, but in later years, he was known as one of the biggest innovators and influencers in rock and roll. James Brown, among many others, copied his moves and his work. Jordan was known for his flamboyant personality, his humor, his moves, his licks, his music styles, everything. I mean, he was the king of the jump blues. I mean, he was given many titles. So it just kind of surprised me that a guy like this is buried at a place like this, but that's okay. I'm just going to give you a little pan shot of the whole cemetery, and there's another cemetery behind those trees. Not only was Jordan a musician, he was also an actor. He was in a few movies, and I think most of them are in public domain, so you can watch them for free anywhere, like on YouTube or someplace, or archive.org. And I was able to watch Beware, and it was a really interesting movie. I mean, it was a good movie for what it was, and it was put out during the height of Jordan's career.
Louis Jordan, now I know why you've become such a famous headliner in show business. You just like to make people happy, even kids like Joe there.
Oh, so now you know. I sort of hope you would.
Of course, I've known right along. I hope you don't consider me as old-fashioned as the Dean and Professor Drury.
Well, Annabelle, darling, when I left Ware, Ohio, I was an unsophisticated kid myself. I didn't know what it was all about. And you know, I still can't account for the act of providence that brought me back here. But there's one thing I'm not gonna miss this time.
So he was an all-around guy. So why did the hits stop? You know, that was kind of my question, because I've been familiar with Jordan and his work the last 25 years, ever since I've been following the Billboard charts and the Joel Whitburn books, which, by the way, he ranks #5, even to this day, as the most successful R&B chart person. However, a guy from Canada Aubrey Graham, also known as Drake, is kind of moving in on him. But Jordan also holds the record on the R&B chart for 113 weeks altogether at the #1 position. That's something Drake or James Brown or Aretha Franklin couldn't even accomplish. It looks like it was an easy task for him, but of course at the time, you know, race records were not really crossover. They weren't really considered mainstream or pop, even though mainstream wasn't really a word back then. So it goes without saying, with hits like Ain't Nobody Here But Us Chickens and Saturday Night Fish Fry and Beans and Cornbread, those are all great songs to listen to. You can hear them on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you stream your music. And be sure to check out his movies too. And during the holidays, be sure to check out his version of Baby It's Cold Outside with Ella Fitzgerald. It's one of the best versions I've ever heard, if not the best. So I am outside, just near the gravesite of Louis Jordan, who led the Tympany Five during the 1940s, and one of pop music's great unsung heroes, one of the kings of the R&B charts. So I am Jason, historically marked, signing off.